If ever there was a prize for the most horrible way to learn of your significant other's affair, I would probably win it and be in its Hall of Fame. Like so many people in this sub, I suddenly found myself as a member of a club that nobody ever wants to be part of. I will never forget the sound of my ex-sister-in-law's voice as she kept saying, I'm sorry, over and over on the phone while I drove home from a week-long business trip. I was confused and had absolutely no idea what she meant, but only after I managed to calm her down somewhat did she inform me that my wife was in hospital and that I needed to hurry home. My mind went into overdrive as I tried to get more information as well as not crash while I began speeding to get there faster. The only thing she told me is that it was an assault, then cut the call and wouldn't answer when I tried to call her again. A bit of background: my ex and I met in our mid-20s. It was through a mutual friend at a barbecue. At first she seemed almost too good to be true. Not only was she incredibly beautiful, but she was also shy and introverted. It took a while for us to officially date, but once it happened I was over the moon. When we first tried to get intimate, she suddenly started crying. Should have taken this as a bad sign. I freaked out and thought it was something I did, but she apologized the next day and told me she was triggered. As it turns out, 2 years before meeting me, she was in a long-term relationship and a guy that was abusive, both emotionally, physically as well as mentally. He would degrade her during their moments of intimacy, then apologize. Afterward, she had a flashback but reassured me it had nothing to do with me, so we took things slow, as she was still in therapy. It was tough, but because I loved her, I believed once we got over this it would make our relationship stronger, and for a while it honestly appeared that way. Fast forward another year, and we'd gotten engaged. First time intimacy also happened during this stage. I was fortunate enough to be able to buy a house for us courtesy of inheritance from my late uncle. Things were going great, and I half-seriously suggested we plant a peach tree, important for later on, to signify new beginnings, and she was all for it. We were wedded not long after that, and quite frankly it was absolutely amazing. Of course we had our normal ups and downs like every married couple, but I considered us more lucky because she always made it a point to never go to bed upset with each other, and she would always point out gently if I did anything to upset her. Sometime later life basically happened and I was promoted at my job. It meant more pay, but it also meant I would be traveling more for work conferences and business meetings. I noticed she had been getting down a lot more and wasn't being as intimate as before. She would keep her phone close to her and even stop gently addressing things that upset her. I tried to talk to her about it, but she assured me that she was fine and this was a phase she was going through, and having no reason to not trust her, I let it go. She would sometimes go to her sister's place and spend the night, telling me she just needed a bit of girl time with her sister. The day I got that fateful phone call was the day she was meant to be keeping her sister company again. I remember rushing into the hospital, barely breathing and frantically asking about my wife when world's most understanding and patient police officer sat me down to explain what happened. He told me he was a friend of my SIL and he happened to respond to a domestic disturbance call. He arrived on the scene to find a couple fighting. The supposed boyfriend was on top of the female, punching her, and she was screaming, trying to scratch him. This didn't make any sense to me because 1, this had nothing to do with my wife because we're married, and 2, literally everyone who knew my wife knew she wouldn't do that. He gave me a knowing look and placed his hand on my shoulder, then told me to be very calm because said girlfriend was actually my wife. If it weren't for the severity of the situation, I would have laughed in his face, but something in the way he said everything made me believe him. I then was ushered in by a nurse to see my wife, and what greeted me to this day I still can hardly find the words to describe it. I just stood there for what seemed like an eternity. Then a doctor came in and explained her injuries to me. The jaw was slightly fractured, her left eye was completely swollen shut and had massive bruising covering half of her face as well as 3 broken ribs. Then the doctor dropped another bomb and told me she was pregnant. I still couldn't understand how this happened. Then I caught sight of her sister. She had first tried to avoid me, but at the persuasion of her police officer friend, she told her what she knew. It turns out my wife's ex had gotten in contact with her 5 months ago. He was doing this redemption pyramid step thing where he would apologize to people he has wronged in order to clear his karma. Anyone else be meter going crazy right now. They began talking more than he convinced her to meet up for coffee and show her he was a changed man. Obviously, old feelings resurfaced, coupled with the fact that he appeared changed now. It soon developed into an emotional affair. My wife approached her sister for advice, who told her to take things slow and just get it out of her system if she needed to, which then led to a physical affair 3 months later. She actually told my wife that she should at least make peace with her ex in whatever form it may be, and even offered to cover for my wife once in a while. My sil was in tears at this point and kept apologizing to me, saying that she didn't know about the abuse as my wife never told anyone other than me and her therapist at the time about it. I was numb, I just couldn't feel anything and was absolutely dumbfounded by my wife's actions. When my wife finally woke up, I was there and she burst into tears upon seeing me. I spent the following months in zombie flight mode. There was individual counseling for her as well as marriage counseling for us at the strong urging of her family. In counseling, she was surprisingly forthcoming about how it happened and how she absolutely hated herself for causing me pain. She mentioned how at one point on her way home from his place she actually fantasized about driving into the river because she smelt like him and didn't want his scent to corrupt me. However, that made sense. She said she'd tried to end it but was too weak, and only after learning that she was pregnant that it actually woke her up and made her realize that any further contact with this man was toxic to not only her but the unborn child as well, hence went to end things in person for good when he snapped on her. She became a shell of herself and developed a phobia for any other males but me. One point, she couldn't even use the bathroom at night unless I was holding her hand. Sad, right? After the baby was born, son by the way, we got a paternity test and he was mine, but the more time I spent with her, the more I realized I didn't hate my wife, I actually loathed her. I couldn't see the woman I married but instead saw his leftovers each time I looked at her. I decided to leave because I was afraid I'd do something I'd regret and be exactly like her abusive ex. She begged me not to leave and even made the ridiculous offer of giving me a hall pass as well as slapping her if I wanted to. I knew at this point I had to get out. She was actually very generous during the divorce. She moved back into her parents and signed a very well thought out co-parenting plan issued by the courts. Moving forward 3 years later and I meet my now fiancé by chance. I was in a bookstore with a buddy of mine and we were discussing Egyptian mythology when this beautiful woman approached me to correct me on my pronunciations of the Egyptian gods and cities. Needless to say, immensely impressed by not only her understanding but also by the fact that she is Egyptian herself. We exchanged numbers, which eventually lead us to dating. When I finally proposed to her, it was actually in front of the peach tree I had planted years ago. I got down on one knee, but before I got my answer she ran into the house, then came out with a ring as well. Turns out she was actually planning on proposing herself because she was madly in love with me and she just didn't want any other woman to have me. My son, in all his sweet childlike innocence, told his mother what happened because he was present when it happened. My ex literally showed up that night in the rain yelling about how could I propose to her, my fiancé, in front of our tree, and that this isn't the end of us. I'm completely exhausted at this point. I cannot go and see because she is the mother of my child, but she is basically harassing me and my fiancé. How do I convince her to move on, to get over her fear of men, and not force me to get a restraining order? Sorry it was long, but I am really desperate. Edit. Wanted to ask a question to the insightful women of Reddit. Something that still bugs me to this day is the fact that she even made time for her ex who took pleasure in destroying her only for her to suffer a much worse fate. Is it normal for the abused to want the attention of the abuser even if she might hate him? Something my ex said once. Edit 2. Forget to add this in the original post. When my fiancé presented me with the ring which she was gonna use to propose to me, she had an engraving on the inner band which states, to my pharaoh. Damn, I love this woman. Top 5 comments. 1. Grey rock strategy. Don't communicate about anything other than son. Don't get sucked into other discussion. It's not your place to convince her of anything. 2. Gotta love how the sister pushed her to have the affair and the only thing she could say is I didn't Know about the abuse? Oh gee, thanks, that makes it all better now. How about the fact that she stabbed you in the back as well? How is her reaction to the divorce, and did she avoid you after your wife got out of the hospital? 3. My husband just had something similar. Not as dramatic as yours. I'm so sorry that happened to you. BTW, but his ex was pretty crazy for a while after they split. Constantly overstepped boundaries and couldn't accept he was with me now. What he said was only talk to her if it was about the children. If she tried to talk about anything else, he would outright ignore her. Try that. She may not like it at first, but eventually she will give up when she realizes she's not getting anything in return for. Best way to handle crazy is do not engage. She shows up on your property again yelling at your house. Do not open the door, do not talk to her, just call the cops and have her removed. She keeps doing it, get a restraining order. It is not unheard of to have a restraining order against someone you also share custody or visitation with. It's not optimal for sure, but it happens. Go no contact with her whole family. Pretty obviously the sister doesn't have your best interests in mind. There's nothing but drama for you there, so just leave it alone. Your ex will eventually lose interest, probably once the next victim arrives in her life. Until then, just buckle up and survive the ride. Go as much no contact as you can, just discussing drop off and pick up. For the kid, you can't fix people like your ex. Your best play is to just distance yourself from her much as possible. 5. Agree to a mutual go-between for co-parenting purposes on the pain of a restraining order, and you move to gain sole custody. Document her actions as well. And someone should punch that naive, evil ex-sil for her meddling and being a driving force in this mess. After discovering my ex's 3-year affair with a guy I knew, I struggled to make it work, but ultimately divorced her. I was never very close to the guy, but our sons were / our friends. I can still vividly remember the flashes of anger as my ex would tell me about the latest flirtation or comment he'd made to her. And when I confronted him and told him that his overtures were completely inappropriate and threatened to out him to his wife if he so much as looked at my ex, he responded that he certainly understood and would keep his distance, and that he was happily married and wasn't interested in my ex. Fast forward to when I learned that they'd already slept together and had continued their affair for years afterward. We can have a discussion another time about why I didn't take action sooner, how I could miss the ongoing affair for so long, etc. Today I have a different question. A good friend of mine, let's call him E, recently called to tell me that he couldn't invite me to a party where 2 of his wife's friends, let's call her F and him M, were going to be because of their feelings towards me. I met F and M at the same time around 2 years ago, and they have been dating almost as long as I've known them. Now apparently the hard feelings go back to 1.5 years ago, at which point my ex and I had separated with a final intent to divorce. At that point I'd met F and M on several social occasions and I liked them both. I thought of them as friends that I got along with and wanted to do stuff with more often. At several of the social functions, I had a friend with me with whom everyone generally understood there was a likely romantic interest brewing. Let's call her GF for simplicity's sake. During our call, he explained that at a pool party 1.5 years ago where M, F, and GF were all in attendance, I got out of the pool, so shirtless as one does when swimming in a pool, and gave F a hug before leaving the party with GF. M was apparently close by and overheard F ask me how life was going. According to E, via conversation with M and F, I responded it would be better with you in it. They told E that GF was close by but apparently didn't hear the remark. Now, I vaguely remember the party, and I'm definitely the type of person who would have given F a hug, with or without a shirt on while at a pool party. I don't recall the hug or the comment on any level, but given that GF and I both liked M and F and had talked about doing more things with them, I could totally see myself responding to F's question with something like it would be better with you in it. We should all get together more often. I would have said something like that, especially if M was near enough that I believed I was having a conversation with both of them. I'm unaware of whether I looked at M when I made the alleged comment, if I actually knew he was there, where GF was, or if she heard the convo. She doesn't remember hearing me say anything inappropriate, or if I also gave him a shirtless hug. But that's all beside the point, because apparently M understood my shirtless hug and comment as an indication that I was making a play for his girl. Since then, apparently whenever I've been together at the same event with GF, now really my GF, M, and F, M perceives that I do something that furthers his perception of me as being attracted to F. In one instance he thought I was staring at her, and most recently he thought that F and I were holding hands for an extended period of time directly in front of him a couple feet away. We, of course, were not. Now, I really and truly don't have any romantic feelings or attraction to F. And what's more, I'm super sensitive to infidelity of any kind, whether the couple is married or not, and can't see myself even being attracted to a woman who I thought could be persuaded to cheat or to leave her relationship for another guy. But that aside, I don't know what my ex's paramour could possibly have said to me that would have made me comfortable with his presence anywhere close to my ex. And I can't really blame M for continuing to be hyper on guard once he perceived a threat to his relationship, something I apparently failed to do in my prior marriage. This could all have been easily avoided if M had confronted me immediately or at any point over the past 1.5 years. Or if I'd been more perceptive to the growing discomfort and resentment that I clearly missed. But hindsight is 20/20 and things are where they are now. So the question is this: is there anything I can do to salvage these relationships? First, I don't want to lose E's friendship because I can't be around at the same time as M and F. Second, there are likely other friendships that have been caught up in and affected by this thing that I wasn't even aware of until yesterday. And third, I really do think M and F are pretty cool, down-to-earth people with a lot in common, who could generally get along outside of this fiasco. Edit, update, thanks to everyone here for being willing to read through my long post and to give me your perspective on a question that isn't even directly related to surviving my ex's infidelity. I've got an update for anyone who's interested. First, let me provide a legend for the initials and people discussed. E, one of my best friends. He called to tell me about the issue this post is all about. M, jealous guy. F, girlfriend of M. The girl I hugged at the pool party 1.5 years ago. GF, my current girlfriend. She was a potential romantic interest at the time of the pool party. Okay, so I called E yesterday afternoon to discuss options. I told him that I was inclined to do what I could to resolve the issue with M because of the effect it had on our friendship, which I greatly valued. I reconfirmed to him that I didn't have any romantic interest in F, and I asked his opinion about my approaching him to let him know that I'd recently been made aware that I'd inadvertently given him the mistaken impression that I had an interest in F and was a threat. I'd also tell M that I regretted that I'd been obtuse to his impressions and reactions, and that I wanted to work things out if possible. E responded that M and F didn't show up to the party they'd been invited to earlier that weekend and were apparently fighting about something unrelated to me. He thought it was likely that they'd break up. So the decision was to leave it alone for the time being. If M and F are still together in a month or two, I'll contact M and have the conversation I proposed above. If it helps, great. If not, oh well. NNP. I also love old E that this could have been resolved 1.5 years ago if anyone would have just made a simple comment. In the future, should anything like this occur, E knows he can simply tell me to slow my roll. So ultimately I think this issue may completely resolve itself. SMH. Thank you all again. Your kind and wise advice are the reason I love Reddit and this sub. Top 5 comments. 1. You come off as a genuine honest man from this post. Can you try to convey precisely what you explained to us here, but with framing it towards winning M over instead of E? I really value my friendship with E and have come to understand that, out of respect for you, he won't have me around at the same time as you and F. He explained how you feel about me, interpreting some of my actions as flirtatious towards F, and I feel like a bad friend to you for not noticing you felt that way, but I'd really like to repair this. It wasn't my intention to make either of you feel uncomfortable, and I really enjoy being around you. All. Do you think there's any way we can work this out? 2. You should have a sit down with M and have a serious man-to-man talk about this. 3. I believe you, but I'm not M. You seem really sincere. My guess is that it's M's insecurity. Are you really hot? Kidding, not kidding? You might intimidate M and, possibly, his GF has made a comment that indicated that she noticed your attractiveness? Honestly, if speaking to him doesn't work, there's nothing you can do. On another note, your buddy not inviting you because of M's insecurity is kind of messed up. When you're the host, you invite anyone you like. If they're uncomfortable, they can stay away, especially in this case. Perhaps, if it were an issue of inviting your ex and her AP soon after their affair, I might feel differently. 4. I wonder what F says about you to M. How much she talks about you and what her reaction is. I don't see this as just M thinking about you in that way. It is not in a vacuum. If a third person is telling you, I wonder how many other people know. And how they perceive it. We all have different boundaries. Maybe you think hugging a woman in front of her committed boyfriend is okay, and I know for a fact that a lot of people feel that way, and I know for a fact that a lot of people feel that is disrespectful. I have worked with many different cultures and sometimes it is a cultural difference. Consider that M and F have different ideas about whether hugging is okay. I wonder if there is some kind of rift between them on agreeing boundaries, if she or he has been cheating or cheated on in the past. I wonder how F feels about you coming to events together versus how M feels about it. I wonder what the conversations was when M said you hugged him and F said he hugged me, I didn't initiate it or what went on. Whatever that was, I guess you've been marked ever since. I also wonder how the other people, M, and maybe F, have weighed in on it, whether they've poo-pooed M's feelings or have agreed with him. I agree you should talk to M. I think you have to be more sensitive to other people's boundaries and open to his feelings. Maybe he is just flat out way too sensitive in that aspect, but I don't think it helps anything to be defensive about it. 5. All you can do is tell your friend that after your marriage you abhor cheating of any kind. You never want to be part of that type of thing. Tell him you actually understand, and if your presence makes anyone uncomfortable, you apologize. Finally, tell the two men to ask the women for her thoughts. I'm sure she knows you haven't been hitting on her. My 31M wife, 31F, had an emotional affair. I uncovered it, leading to separation. It later progressed to a physical affair. Now she wants to fix things. We have 2 young kids, been together 10 plus years and married for 5 years. In more detail. Starting last fall, things were getting rocky, typical feeling like roommates, but I also failed to support her mental health issues. I attempted putting in additional effort. It was clear my wife was not feeling it. Earlier this summer, the phone bill revealed numerous calls between my wife and a coworker. Wife works remote, this guy lives/works about 3 hours away. I confronted her. She claimed friends only and didn't want to lose an outlet because of lack of other friends. I asked her to build trust and prove it was friendship. Friction builds over the next couple days and weeks as fails to provide updates or information. Phone records show continued frequent communication. Obviously, I'm not buying the friendship argument. 4 to 6 weeks of sleeping in separate rooms, living in separate areas of the house, marriage counseling, and individual counseling leads to her moving out in late July, equitable timeshare of the kids. She claims she needs alone time. However, I know communication with other guy continues. She bails on joint counseling. She goes to 2 to 3 sessions of individual counseling between August and November. A few weeks later, she finally admits that they both have feelings for each other, nothing physical yet because she knows it will complicate our relationship and her work situation. However, they make plans most weekends that she doesn't have the kids. In October, maybe sooner, I know it turned physical as they spent a full weekend together, not just a Saturday afternoon or evening. Courtesy of this site, other forums, and counseling, I began really focusing on myself in September. I was in a pretty good place until the certainty of it progressing to a physical affair hit. Now I'm up and down. A few weeks ago she told me it was over between them. I do not have proof that it's over, nor do I know who ended it or why. I haven't asked, I only want to ask questions with neutral party present. She asked if I would consider joint counseling again. I said I would go. Obviously, the initial step is a plan for getting other guy out of her life permanently. Hard to move forward if that doesn't happen. So I'm at a crossroads. I hit a point in early October that I finally realized I can survive and thrive on my own. I obviously still have feelings for her, but the thoughts of her cheating on me are quite paralyzing. Sometimes, I realize now this is normal. The kids also play a major factor. It really sucks not having them around half the time, but I struggle with how much weight that should have on our relationship. I'm quite certain that quitting her job is not on the table, especially since she has to support herself. Do I take the long road of reconciliation or run with the idea that I know I can thrive without her? I probably change my mind about every 5 minutes. I suppose there is no rush to decide. Probably miss some details. Hopefully nothing major. Anyways, I've been lurking here for a few months. So much helpful insight that I'm now trying to directly tap into. Thank you so much for the support I've already received just by reading the other posts. Top 5 comments. 1. Let me put this to you in a way that will hurt, but you need to understand. You are a backup. You are a second choice. You are a second chance. Do not take her back. If she lied about it, went behind your back, and then told you it's over between us, take me back, then she got ditched. Now she's crawling back to you. I bet you money if you keep digging, which I implore you to do, ask all the details and prepare for lies, then she was planning to leave you forever. The kids do not want a father who is with a woman that doesn't respect him. They may not understand now, but they will. It will get worse. It will happen again. I trust you. And that paralyzing fear will intensify. Don't be a backup plan. Have respect for yourself to not do that to yourself. 2. I can't tell you whether to try or not, but I do know that if you do try to reconcile, Terry Real, in a webinar with Esther Perel, said you give the partner 3 to 4 months and that is it. In that time frame, they have to go into deep recovery or you are done. So no more skipping out on sessions, but showing through action that she's willing to do the recovery work. Link to webinar below. It came from my therapist. It's long, but the relevant part is in the first 20 minutes or so. 3. I agree that it is your choice. Personally, I would be inclined to see how she does in co-parent no interest in reconciliation counseling. See how she puts her life together. See if she prioritizes the kids. See if she is becoming someone that you would like to date. Your marriage is over. This is a different woman. You don't know her yet. How quickly are you willing to let a strange woman into your life? Knowing, however, that you are going to be dealing with her for the rest of your kids' lives. However, I do think that continued counseling so that you can work well and thrive together is vital. Take the slow road. You know, especially with young kids, that you aren't ready for dating others anyway, so you might as well take the time you have to develop a good working relationship with this woman. Define your boundaries now, though, because if you don't set boundaries, you don't have to tell her about them, but you need to know what they are to protect your heart and keep common sense. 4. Leave. What actually happened is way worse than what you'll ever squeeze out of her. You would have known this if you hadn't shown her hand when you had suspicions and started snooping instead. 5. Read my post from a couple weeks ago on my story. Similar. I can just say that I'd recommend you not find yourself in this same position 10 years from now. I'm exactly 10 years older than you. You are the 2ND/backup. It won't get better because the get back equals less respect for you. I'm not judging, though. I believed and held out hope 10 years ago. It was not the correct decision, in retrospect.